Right, good afternoon, everyone. And
good afternoon, sir.
It's 2 o'clock, so it's time for me to open this hearing session concerning the Old Oakham Park Royal Development Corporation local plan modifications. Thank you all for attending. Before I start proceedings, I need to do a couple of things. First of all, I need to check that everyone can see and hear me. So can you, if you can see and hear me, can you use the hand tool, which you'll find at the top of the page, to indicate that you can hear me? So let me see. Kate, Ollie, yes, well done. Everyone can see and hear me. Thank you very much. You can all put your hands down now. That's good. Right, and the second thing I need to do, in accordance with the data protection regulations, is that I need to advise you that this hearing session is being recorded and being streamed live, so anyone else can record it as well. If you are not happy that your image or your voice is recorded and retained on record, then you can still view the proceedings, but you would have to switch off your microphone and your camera, and that would prevent you from taking part. We had a test session last week, so I hope everybody has heard about the protocols in using the team software, which is we don't use the chat function. We keep the microphone switched off unless you're actually speaking, and make sure that if you're having a side conversation with somebody else in your team or somebody else in your room, that you do so with your microphone switched off. Okay, my name's Paul Clark. I'm a Chartered Town Planner, and I've been appointed by the Secretary of State to hold an examination into the soundness of this local plan, and I'm assisted by the Programme Officer for the examination, Charlotte Glancy, who's not here today. We've got Hannah Glancy, who's acting as Programme Officer on her behalf, and Hannah's just waved at us, for those of you who can see her in the picture there. Feel free to drop in and out of the hearing sessions, but if you do so, do not press the leave button. Just close your camera and close your microphone if you want to walk away for a while, and switch them back on again when you need to rejoin. This is the final session in the series of hearings this week, and this one's somewhat different because it's results from the right to be heard in respect of one representation in respect of one particular site, and the issue arises because the modifications to the section of policy P4, besides altering the jobs target, specifically added a mention of safeguarding Twyford West transfer station site in accordance with the West London plan, and the supporting text is in paragraph 458 is also modified, and the proposals map is likewise modified to include the site as a West London waste plan site, and this results from discussions which took place at hearing session 2H in the previous series of hearing sessions on the submitted plan. Now, Wards of London seek specific changes to the modifications, correcting the references to the addresses, to the address in a couple of places, and inserting text in paragraph 458, and they also seek the removal of the site from the SIL designation, and they give reasons for that. The corporation's response is to propose no further change, and they explain that the local plan policy EU6 reflects the West London Waste Plan position and safeguards waste sites in the area in line with the West London Waste Plan adopted in 2015, and the site at 100 Twyford Abbey Road was identified as an existing site at this time. And the corporation notes that the site is currently in waste use. And then their response also explains that it quotes paragraph 6.21 from the supporting text for the West London Waste Plan. Nevertheless, they do propose that a change be made to correct the references to the site, but they don't intend to remove the site from SIL. So one thing I need to clarify is whether policy P4C, that's the addition added in as a result of the modification, whether that and paragraph 458 is meant to refer to the Twyford Waste Transfer Station, or to Twyford Waste and Recycling Centre, or to 100 Twyford Abbey Road, or to all three. So I need to be clear about that. And then we obviously need to have a discussion about whether the site 100 Twyford Abbey Road meets or does not meet the criteria for SIL release. So on the first point, I think it's probably best if we hear first from the corporation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share an extract from Ward's papers, which outlines the site in contention in red. So we can talk in reference to that document there. Now, I suppose I ought to have asked everybody to introduce themselves, because there's quite a few new faces that we've not met previously. So perhaps before I get the discussion underway, I'll invite Richard Moules on behalf of the corporation to introduce himself and his team, and then I'll do the same for whoever's leading for wards. But Mr. Moules first, if you'd like to introduce your lot.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm Richard Moules, counsel instructed by OPDC. Taking the lead this afternoon will be Lauren Laviniere. If I could ask her to pop her camera on and introduce herself, please.
Hello, I'm Lauren Laviniere, Senior Planning Policy Officer for OPDC.
Thank you, and she'll be assisted by Emma Williamson.
Hi, I'm Emma Williamson, the Director of Planning at OPDC. And
also Tom Cardis.
Hi, I'm Tom Cardis. I'm the Head of Planning Policy at OPDC.
Thank you, and then finally Peter Farnham as well.
Peter was there. Yes, there he is.
Hi there. I am, sorry, apologies. Peter Farnham, OPDC, Principal Planner of the Policy Team.
Thank you. So that's our team, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moules. And so is it Kate Ollie who will be leading for wards?
Good afternoon, sir. Yes, Kate Ollie for wards, council, and I'll be assisted by Mr. Rainer Zimmermann, Director at Arab.
Right.
Associate Director Kate, sorry.
Thank you. Right. Okay, so thank you very much for that. And so let's clear up the first point about the site and how we address it, and whether exactly what policy 4C and paragraph 4.58 are meant to be referring to. So can I ask the OPDC to kick off on that? Mr. Walls, who do you want to ask to deal with that one?
Thank you. I'll ask Lauren to deal with that, please.
Right.
Thank you. In response to your question, Inspector, policy P4C and paragraph 4.58 are meant to refer to Twyford Waste Transfer Station. This is the name given to the site in the adopted West London Waste Plan. The reference to Twyford Waste and Recycling Centre is incorrect. We introduced this wording as a modification to address your question, and in response to that, and as you've noted, we have proposed modifications to the policies map, place diagrams, and figures accompanying policy EU6 to show all of the West London waste sites in the OPDC area. And the place policy, as you'll see in P4, it refers to a site that's allocated and helps to meet the waste apportionment needs, the borough's waste apportionment needs in the London plan. And that site is the Twyford Waste Transfer Station site. All other sites all sites are covered by policy EU6 and are identified in the figure to accompany EU6.
Right, and so is that in fact the site that's outlined in red on this plan?
So the Twyford Waste Transfer Station is the site outlined in blue.
And that's what the modification that gives us P4C is meant to refer to, Twyford Waste Transfer Station site there. But the reference in 458 is wrong, is that right?
So yes, the reference in 4.58 should also refer to Twyford Waste Transfer Station.
Yeah, not the Twyford Waste and Recycling Centre.
I will just look at what you were looking at, sir. I'll just open the plan.
Paragraph 458.
Sorry, apologies.
That's all right.
Trying to. Just waiting for it to load. Sorry, apologies.
No worries. Yes, that reference is 458 in the plan as proposed to be modified. It's 450 in the plan as submitted.
Right, here we are. Yes, so the reference is to Twyford Waste Recycling Centre and it being safeguarded for waste apportionment purposes through the West London Waste Plan. That is the Twyford Waste Transfer Station.
Okay.
That's a reference to that.
Yes. Okay.
So yes, references in paragraph 4.58 should refer to the Twyford Waste Transfer Station to be consistent with the adopted West London Waste Plan.
Right. Okay. So that all refers to the site in blue on this plan. Is that right? That's
correct.
And not the site in red. So the site in red is, as I understand it, 100 number 100, what the name of the road is now, Twyford Abbey Road.
100 Twyford Abbey Road.
Yes, and that's the bit which this representation wants to take out of SIL. Is that right? As you understand it?
Yes, that's how I understand it, yes.
Okay. Right, so having had that clarification, Kate Ollie, would you like to clarify which sites your representations are referring to?
Thank you, sir. Yes, our representations refer to the site outlined in red. That's our site. That's the Wards of London site.
So would you be happy then if the references in the modification to policy P4 and the supporting text paragraph 4.58 were changed to refer to the Twyford Waste Transfer Station and not to refer to the Twyford Waste and Recycling Centre? And that will make it clear that those matters relate to the site outlined in blue. Would that deal with the first 2 points of your specific changes that you're seeking?
Yes, it would. There's another small point that I ought to raise, but yes, as long as our site, 100 Twyford Abbey Road, is distinguished from what we call the allocated site, Twyford Waste Transfer Station to the north, then we would be content, because for reasons I may come on to, and to summarise, it's important that the clear blue water between our site and the allocated sites is reflected.
Yes.
I've got a point, sir, in relation to the specific wording of the supporting text, if I may, in a moment.
Yes, that's right. Your microphone is positioned so it's picking up the sound from your loudspeakers, so you're getting a bit of feedback there. Right. Before we go on to the extra point you want to make about drafting, and I mustn't forget it, but can I also get clarification about another point, because your representation seeks additional text in paragraph 458, specifically referring to 100 Twyford Abbey Road, i.e. the site in red. Would you still be making that representation? Would you still be pressing for that additional text to be included?
So I'd be grateful for the chance to take an instruction on that, but that is the part in which I just had an extra point to make, and I'll explain why when we get to that.
Okay. Do you need a few moments to take instructions on?
It may be that those instructing are able to let me know in the usual way via our WhatsApp group chat.
Okay, just pause a moment while I make a note anyway.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I've made a note, so I'll come back to you now, and you can make the extra point you wanted to make about that text there.
Thank you, sir. I'm just seeking a brief clarification, but I think we're almost there.
All right.
I do apologise.
No, don't apologise. Take the time that's needed.
Well, so I'll come on to the point that I wanted to make about it. Generally, that might inform what we do. So, in terms of the wording saying 100 Twyford Abbey Road is also a safeguarded site, if 100 Twyford Abbey Road were redeveloped for a non-waste use, then compensatory provision would need to be made in line with London Plan, etc. I was going to explain when we got on to the civil points, but the site actually has the benefit of a lawful development certificate, I understand, for Class B2 use, and so it could. The use made of the site could be for any other use within that use class, so therefore it may not persist in a waste use anyway. And given that there's the ability to move within that use class, then it seemed to me more appropriate for the wording to say a compensatory provision may need to be made in line with policy, rather than saying it would need to be made, because it would depend upon whether a change within the use class was made. And then a further change beyond that, or not. But it may be so that we simply don't need this wording, because it's clear from policy anyway that our site, 100 Twyford Abbey Road, is on the face of it a safeguarded site according to policy. And what we really sought to achieve was the making of that distinction between our site and the blue lined site to the north, and we're very grateful for that. So the further supporting text, with respect, I don't submit that we need, but if it is going to remain in, then I'd ask for the substitution of the word would with the word may to reflect what I've just explained.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think that bottoms out my issue 1, doesn't it? Yeah, your Kate Ollie
Yes.
is nodding. Mr. Moulds, are you happy with that? And we can move on from issue 1.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's move on to issue 2 then, which is, I suspect, what we really want to talk about this afternoon. Does 100 Twyford Abbey Road meet the criteria for SIL release? Now, I summarised the OPDC's response to this. So I guess the person to kick off the discussion is actually Kate Ollie for this issue. So over to you first, Kate Ollie.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to make some brief submissions, and I'll bring in Mr. Zimmern. So we might need to look at the West London waste plan. So may I check, sir, that you have that to hand, and also our representations of the 2nd of July and the 2 attachments.
Yeah,
Document library.
I'm not sure I've got the West London waste plan, unless someone can remind me which examination document it is, and I can look it up. But I have got the submissions on behalf of wards of London, which have been. So I've got the covering letter of 28th of October, and the attachments to that, which include the plan that I just put up on the screen. And so, yes, I've got the letter from Assessons of 2nd of July, and
so I won't need to go to the letter of the 28th of October. I was going to say we were informed, I think, that the waste plan was going to be OSD 49, although I didn't see it myself previously.
Right.
That's underneath supporting studies in examination library.
Right. Supporting studies in the examination library. Yes, that's. Wait and see if I can find that.
If you scroll down to the bottom inspector, it's towards the end of the webpage.
The page I've got open is the examination documents page. So that's got various headings in it, and the lowest ones I've got are the matters and issues, hearing statements and related documents. Is it one of those?
Not on that web page, Inspector. It's the one, if you go to the page before that, it has a series of web pages with key documents and supporting studies, and it's the supporting studies web page there.
The one that said key submission documents or examination documents.
It's supporting documents. It should be the fifth page. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll be.
LSD 49, you said. Oh yeah, there it is. Right. Okay, I've opened up the West London Waste Plan, and I have got the Assesson's letter and the other things. So
thank you, sir. Great.
Should be able to refer to them as you go through.
Okay, yeah, so the representations of the 2nd of July 2021, the schematic master plan of Allies and Morrison, and the Arup Waste Safeguarding Review report of June 2021.
Yeah.
So to introduce the site, sir, the 100 Twyford Abbey site is operated as a construction, demolition and excavation waste recovery facility by Bridgemarks Limited, trading as Gowing and Percy. And the most recent 5 years of waste return data, so that's for 2016 to 2020, show that the maximum waste throughput of 124,610 tonnes occurred in 2016. I'll give you a reference, if I may, sir, to the relevant section in the Arup report, but I don't need to turn it up for the time being. It's just for your benefit. It's section 2.3 of the Arup report. Yep. On page 4 or page 7 if one looks at it electronically. Now that's to be compared to the maximum permitted annual capacity of 350,000 tonnes. And there's actually a declining waste throughput trend with just about 63,000 tonnes in 2020, which is only 18% of the permitted maximum. Now, the point I've made reference to already, sir, is that the site has a lawful development certificate for any use within use class B2. So it doesn't have to remain in waste use in any case. And I'll come back to this once again later on, because it's clearly of great relevance in my submission to the issue of whether in all the circumstances this site needs to or should remain in the SIL. And OPDC's response to our representations relies over and again on the site being currently in waste use. If I could turn you, sir, when you're ready, sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that in this format you can't actually see my writing hand, so you don't know when I finished making a note. I'll look up at the screen when I'm ready for you to carry on. Okay, so carry on now.
Thank you. So if we could turn to the West London Waste Plan, please, sir. I'd like to go to page little Roman 2 in the executive summary, so right at the beginning. And we'll have listed the 8 allocated waste sites. And we would see there as the first one, number 352, that is the Twyford Waste Transfer Station, 1.24 hectares. So that's the blue lined site that we just looked at on the map that you helpfully shared. That's not our site, of course.
Hang on a second. I'm just going through the West London Waste Plan, but I'm not. This is the adopted plan, July 2015. I've got the executive summary there, and was that? Oh yes, page 2 of that. Yes, that's what you wanted me to refer to.
Yes, thank you, sir. There should be 8 sites listed. The first one being Twyford Waste Transfer Station.
Yes, I can see that.
And what we note from that, sir, is that our site, the red line site, 100 Twyford Abbey Road, isn't listed It's not an allocated site in the waste plan, which means it's not needed to meet the London plan waste apportionment target of the borough.
Right.
We were anxious to achieve those corrections, so there was no confusion of our site with allocated sites, because those are wholly different.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Rainer Zimmern to speak by way of introduction about the particular waste stream that's managed at the 100 Twyford Abbey Road site in the context of the London Plan and West London Waste Plan. So, Mr. Zimmern, may I ask you to comment on that, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
If I may, so if I just make one key point, there is no requirement in the London Plan that boroughs must deal with non-apportioned waste, such as the waste that was just described, which is construction, demolition and excavation waste, which is exactly this waste type that is being managed at the 100 Twyford Abbey Road site by Gowan and Percy at this time. And this also explains why the site is not included as an allocated site in the West London Waste Plan, which is unlike the Twyford Waste Transfer Station site, which does manage apportioned waste, particularly household waste. And this is confirmed in the West London Waste Plan at paragraph 1.8. That's on page 11. And also in paragraphs 4.41, page 29. I can just sort of read out the sections if that would be helpful.
No, I just make sure that I've got it.
Okay.
And then so
it's
1.8.
Paragraph 1.8, page 11.
Page 11, yeah, I've got that.
And then
the other one was on page 29.
Yeah, it's paragraph 4.4.1.
4.41. Let me just read those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can see there it says that the West London Waste Authority is not responsible for construction, demolition and excavation waste.
That's correct, sir, yeah.
And then and on page 29. It was 4.4.1. I can see that. I'm going to share that so that everybody else can see what it is that I'm reading. It's 4.4.1. Go past it. There we go.
There's particularly the beginning section talking about construction, demolition, and excavation waste.
Yeah. So the particular, that first sentence is the key one, isn't it? That's your construction, demolition, excavation waste is a large waste stream within London, although it is not included within the London Plan apportionment target assigned to boroughs. Yep. Okay. Yep. Got that. Good.
And I think the other point that relates to this as well is that this is also a waste stream that is achieving quite high recycling rates already within London. So that is a sort of a further point that's being made.
Okay.
Therefore, it's of less importance in terms of the plan making.
Got that. Yep.
So, Mr. Zimmern, can we focus for a moment on the 8 sites which are allocated in the waste plan, just to talk about those?
Yes. Yes, there are 8 existing waste sites allocated in the West London Waste Plan, and we've just will refer to this in the executive summary. They are listed there. The West London Waste Plan identified 8 existing waste sites considered to have particular potential for future waste capacity expansion. And that is including alternative forms of waste management as well. And this does not include the 100 Twyford Abbey Road site. One additional site is also allocated, and that goes back to the executive summary in table 2, Roman numerals 2. Which has an opportunity for developing future waste management facilities. That is the Western International Market site, Hayes Road in Hounslow.
Yeah.
So this can be seen at figure 5.1 on electronically on page 41 or at hard copy on page 32. That's where the 8 allocated sites are shown. You just want to have a look at those. There's also a figure in the Arab report, figure 6 on page 12.
Is that the one you want me to look at?
That's the one, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the one, correct. So these are all the 8 allocated sites. And the Twyford Waste Transfer Station site is shown there.
Okay.
To the north of our side.
Thank you.
Did you want to comment on that, Mr. Zimmern, or was it simply to make the point?
Yeah, it's just the point really that our side, the 100 Twyford Abbey Road site, is not an allocated site, and it's the Twyford Waste Transfer Station site, which is the allocated site in the plan.
Thank you. So that's why we've submitted that it's extremely important that the corrections were made because of the clear blue water between our site and the allocated sites in the ways we've just referred to.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I won't labour that point further. So in terms of whether the site meets the criteria for still release, I'd like to make the point first that the time for this decision to be made is now. Seems to be accepted, but the OPD response, looking at the 3rd bullet on the 3rd page of the note prepared for this hearing, with respect, if that's saying something different to that, then that will be wrong. This must be dealt with at the plan making stage. Identification of still boundaries is a strategic matter for the plan making process and can't be left to ad hoc individual planning applications later down the line.
I understand what you're saying, yes.
The OPDC response says that if a proposal for non-waste use came forward, then it will be assessed at that point against policy, including the requirement for compensatory provision. I don't have any quarrel per se with the last part of that, but it doesn't answer the point that the issue of the still boundary needs to be looked at now and a decision made now. And irrelevant again here to note that there can be non-waste use on this site without the need for the authority to assess an application for it, because the site has a lawful development certificate for any use within Class B2. So it simply need not be in waste use and can cease waste use at any point. And that would clearly override the policy requirements, which would otherwise apply to a site in waste use and therefore safeguarded by policy, a site which didn't have that ability to choose, as it were. So that's a really crucial point to keep in mind when deciding between the 2 competing sets of submissions in this case, in my submission. And it does diminish the reliance that can be placed by OPDC as they give in their consultation response. I don't think I want to go to that lengthy document, but it's found at page 623 and elsewhere in the section responding to our representations, where they say all of the sites have a role to play and cumulatively help ensure West London can address its waste needs. And they say that irrespective of whether the site can increase capacity, existing capacity that can be achieved on site can contribute towards meeting waste needs. Now, the site can contribute, certainly, but it need not and may well not be doing so at any chosen point in future. So having, so I need to pause for a moment.
Yeah.
I set a hair running by referring to the consultation response, didn't I? That page 623.
Is this the document you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that was the one that was, and it's these entries that start on its numbered page. I don't know if you can see it or enlarge it.
The response to our representations begins at page 617.
Yeah, so
And
that's
it runs. Sorry.
it's this one here that I'm moving my cursor around. I don't know if you can see that. It's the second penultimate one on page 617, and then it goes through the next one and on to the following page. Down here, there we go. And does it go on any further? Yes, it does.
It finishes at page 627 at the end of that page.
Okay, and they're all the pages which were sent in with Ward's letter. Yep, I have got that. Good. Okay.
Thank you. Fine. So I just referred to the second paragraph in the section on page 623. I was quoting from that just now.
Yeah. Yep, got that.
So okay. Just to be seen in the context of the LDC. So to go on to the potential contribution of the site and to summarise that, it's been set out in the representations on the 2nd of July. We supplied, as you're aware, sir, an indicative master plan prepared by Allies and Morrison, which shows that 315 homes and 225 more jobs that the redevelopment of the site can offer. And there's a helpful aerial view on the second page of that, which we might perhaps have a brief look at.
That's
the Allies and Morrison master plan.
Yeah, let's have a look. Make sure I'm looking at the document you want me to look at. Is that the one?
Just waiting. Yes, thank you very much indeed, sir. And that's the correct page.
Right.
So I'm sure been noted already, but it shows the placement of the site right at the edge of the existing sill boundary, opposite existing established residential communities and bounded to the north by the canal. So if you'd be happy to oblige, I'd be grateful if we could scroll on actually to page 4, because I just want to refer briefly to what's said there. That it's called unlocking the site. So the unlocking of the site is explained there within 5 key moves, and it's simply to make the point that it's been well thought out. Obviously, this indicative scheme is just one feasible option. That's a design solution that maximises the potential of the site. It optimises housing density and it responds to the existing residential areas to the north and west. Of course, so you're not determining a planning application today, but it's just to make the point that has been thought through.
Okay.
Moving on to the availability of the site. This is also a key point. It's in single ownership, so it doesn't require further land assembly. Its delivery would be straightforward. And as noted in our representations, many of the sites, 7 or 8, in the OPDC's development capacity study, which are identified in that as having potential for housing development and economic uses, are not in fact available for development because the landowner has not expressed an interest in the development of their site. And that's acknowledged on the face of the study. It's said in response to our representations in a general way that constraints are considered to be able to be addressed in the design and operation of development, but obviously not if the landowner isn't willing. So we've listed those sites in the representations. I won't read them out, but if one looks at the development capacity study in Appendix A, it makes good what we say in our representations.
Yeah.
It's between pages 25 and 38 of 49. I don't think we need to go to that. So there's a very different position with this site, which can be anticipated to come forward within the first 5 years of the plan. And as we noted, if those sites or some of them don't come forward, then the projected housing capacity for the plan period would be reduced, we've said, by 1,350 homes. The number of jobs would go down as well by 1,390. So 1,350 and 1,390. And our site would be able to plug a substantial part of that gap.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to suitability. So that was availability. Going on to suitability. We say it's extremely suitable for redevelopment. The OPDC response, which is reflected, sir, in your note in the second bullet on the third page, so on the last page.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the same page I referred to before, page 623 of the consultation response. Again, I don't need to go to it, but I understand, so you might want to show others what I'm referring to. But the phrase there appears also in that consultation response. It's a misdescription. It says rather grudgingly that the site's near to housing, but surrounded by a designated sill on all sides, with the exception of a small interface with non-sill land. That's just not right, sir, which is why we wanted to refer to the image on the Allies and Morrison master plan.
Okay.
My submission, that's not a small, but actually a significant interface. And we have existing residential areas abutting the site on two sides.
Yeah. Okay,
So
let me have a look at the plan again.
It's residential to the west and north.
Yeah. Let me just be clear what you're referring to. Let me just let me enlarge this a bit. And I'm going to share it with you. Just to be clear, you're talking about, I don't know if you can see my cursor on this screen.
Actually, I can't yet, sir.
No, okay. What you should have is, oh, it hasn't, for some reason it hasn't, that's it, right. You should now be seeing the front page of the Allies and Morrison master plan, and we can see your site in red and with an asterisk. I don't know if you can see my cursor, it's very faint, but I assume when you're talking about the housing to the west, you're talking about the area of housing that is to the left of the star.
Yes, sir.
And clearly outside the sill, and then there's to the north, but within the sill, the small triangle of land. There is a housing block there, isn't there?
Yes.
And that's on a triangular site, which extends about halfway along the front of your client's site, with the canal behind it, which extends along the rest of your client's site on the other side of the road. So that triangular site containing a housing block is what you mean by the second side. Is that right?
Yes.
There's no other housing that you want to point me towards. Joy.
Unless if we go further north, sir, the green area, I'm not sure actually. To be fair,
The green area is the other. Is what we were correctly identified as the allocated waste transfer station. These buildings in between, my understanding is that those are commercial buildings. I don't think they're residential.
No, we're not saying that. No, sorry, I just couldn't see on the map. So, yes, so that area, so those two sides, and then the industrial use to the south is warehousing and storage. And so the important point to note there is that it's not, contrary to what OPDC said in their consultation response, likely to clash with incoming residential occupiers. So the site's very much suitable for a transition zone between the industrial and the residential. And the schematic master plan has designed the scheme to incorporate both those uses.
Okay.
So the site very much lends itself to act as a transition zone between this quite substantial residential use we saw to the west and the industrial activities to the east and south in the remaining sill. The land uses proposed in the master plan are complementary to both of those. There's no physical limitation to which the site is subject, such as problems with access, ground conditions, flood risk or pollution, and there wouldn't be any potential adverse impact on landscape features or nature or heritage conservation. And it's also large enough that new open space can be provided on site.
Okay.
So suitability. Going on to accessibility, that's also addressed in the 2nd of July representations. I don't want to repeat all of that, but it does point to the comprehensive pedestrian infrastructure around the site, comprehensive pedestrian infrastructure with direct links to a range of everyday services just 10-minute walk away, including local primary school, hospital, numerous employment sites. There's a bus and cycle lane directly outside the site and at least 6 buses per hour from bus stops which are directly adjacent to the site. And they give a fast and direct connection to underground and overground stations.
Right.
So coming on to the potential impact on the rest of the sill of the removal of this site. On its edge. Now the site's only 1.1 hectares in size, so whilst it's large in the sense of being able to offer open space, which is a benefit, it doesn't make a strategic contribution to the sill, bearing in mind that covers an area of 1,200 acres. And it's also located, as we can plainly see, at the western extremity, so it's not a key integrated site within the sill. We say its removal won't compromise the integrity or delivery of the remaining sill land or compromise the continued successful operation of neighbouring uses within the sill. And it's relevant to note here that the Arup report identifies, and that's at section 2.5, the site never operated at capacity. So as I highlighted at the beginning, the maximum annual throughput is 350,000 tonnes of waste. That's the maximum permitted, but the actual throughputs have been significantly lower, just 18% of that in 2020. So I'd like to ask Mr. Zimmern again to comment on his view as to the contribution of the site in terms of the annual waste throughput, and whether there might be potential to increase that throughput at the site.
Certainly. Thank you. The potential to significantly increase waste throughput at the site, of the client site, beyond what the 5-year maximum is considered, above the 5-year maximum that we've seen, about 130,000 ton, is considered unlikely, as this would require additional waste processing lines to physically extract and store more recyclables on the site. And you also need more circulation space as the waste increases, more deliveries are happening, more sorting equipment, more mobile plant is required, and operatives in turn to make these operations work. So this is set out in the Arab report, section 2.4, the top on page 6, the hard copy, or page 8 if you have the electronic version open.
Right.
Overall, sorry, do you need?
No, go on.
Yeah,
Carry on.
Okay, thank you, sir. The contribution of the site is not significant at the Greater London or regional level or sub-regional level, as was sort of stated in the report under sections 2.5 on page 7. It's or page 9 electronically. So this is quite a small quantity of waste that's being managed. Particularly its construction and demolition waste, which, as the West London Waste Plan stated, there is sufficient capacity and a high recycling rate.
Okay, so you're saying that to increase throughput, you needed additional waste processing lines, and that would require more space. Is that essentially what the point is there?
Yes, that's correct. It's very, very rudimentary operations at the moment, and to do more, that would require more operational equipment, processing plant, and also storage, but also circulation space to make that all work.
Okay. We've also said so in terms of, sorry, I'll wait.
Okay.
Just to make the point that in terms of potential intensification beyond the permitted annual throughput, we've said that's considered very limited because the site is located close to neighbouring residential areas.
Okay.
And the last point I'd like to deal with, sir, is the important issue of compensatory capacity, without prejudice to the point I make about the lawful development certificate, or even if I'm for some reason wrong about that. It's an important issue to be dealt with nonetheless. We've noted that the redevelopment of waste management sites for non-waste uses isn't prohibited by planning policy. Okay, we're dealing with this in theory due to the lawful development certificate, but we acknowledge that on the face of it, policy does seek to preserve waste management capacity, requires any capacity lost to other types of development to be replaced through compensatory provision. Hence, as I said, we've looked at that issue. So if I could again ask Mr. Zimmerman to explain, how have Arup approached this issue in the report? If you could helpfully summarise for us, if you can, please.
Yes, thank you. So the options considered for reprovision of capacity were set out in section 4.5 of the Arab report. And that assumes a loss of capacity at the 5-year maximum, which was the 124,600 tons or 130,000 tons, rough measures, which was which has declined since 2016. So this been a declining waste throughput at the site. So it is explained at section 4.6 of the report. It's on page 17 or page 19 if you look at it electronically. That detailed analysis of the 8 waste sites, there's 7 in the West London Waste Authority area and 1 in the North London Waste Authority area, with similar waste management operations to those at the 100 Twyford Abbey Road site, was undertaken. And that includes none of the 8 allocated sites that are included in the West London Waste Plan. These are new additional sites. So that's we did analysis of these 8 sites, taking into consideration both the maximum permitted annual throughput of the 350,000 tons and its adjusted maximum throughput of 130,000 tons, there's sufficient available waste throughput capacity in the West London waste area to compensate for the loss of the 100 Twyford Abbey Road site. So those locations of those facilities that were considered is shown on figure 9, page 18 and page 20 on the electronic version. If that would be helpful to sort of look at that, to put that into perspective with regard to the allocated sites. Yes, that's the one. Correct. So the ones that you can see marked with a red dot are these additional sites. So there are 7 within the West London Waste Authority boundary, and then there's 1 PB Donahue, which is just in the North London Waste Authority area. So this is these are all the sites.
Okay. So you looked at 8 sites, but not to be confused with the 8 allocated sites.
Correct.
Just to be clear. Okay.
Yeah, they're all additional sites which are not part of the allocation in the West London plan. So the exercise showed, if you see page 19 and page 21, that the site studies can provide waste throughput capacity of approximately 700,000 tons per annum, with 3 sites offering in total 600,000 tons per annum located in the West London Waste Authority area alone, which clearly shows there is more than sufficient available waste throughput capacity in the West London waste area to compensate for the loss of the site. The figures are set out in also in table 1 of page 20 and 22 respectively of the Arab report.
Do we need to go to that, or is that just for reference? I think that might just be for reference, sir, but so you've got that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. All right.
Okay.
See it there. Hang on a second.
Okay.
There we go. That's the one, yes?
That's correct, sir. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Okay, I have it.
Okay, thank you very much. As stated in the West London Waste Plan, at the paragraph that we looked at earlier at 4.4.1, it was considered that there is substantial capacity of construction, demolition and excavation waste in West London. Analysis of Environment Agency waste data for 2016 to 2020 by Arab has shown, as we already noted just now, that the 100 Twyford Abbey Road site is of low importance, contributing less than 1 to 2% of waste treatment throughputs in Greater London. So the West London Waste Plan also states that high recycling performance of construction and demolition and excavation waste is also reason not to include the waste type in the plan.
Right. Okay, I've got that.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Zimmerman, I think the report also talks about in the alternative delivering compensatory provision by providing space within a new developed site. Can you say a bit about that, please?
Yeah, there's really a drive in the industry to provide, firstly compensation that is at the same level within the waste hierarchy. So if it's recycling operations, it should be again recycling. But there's also an opportunity here to provide space within the new development side for establishing a circular economy hub, which would be at or above the recycling level of the waste hierarchy. So that's where people could reuse and repair, for instance, old computers or fridges and freezers, trying to actually move even higher up in the waste hierarchy, and that would be also in policy keeping with the OPDC objectives and the GLA objectives. And that's a bit more detailed in the report in section 4.7, page 21 of the hard copy, or electronically at page 23.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. So just drawing all those points together, sir, if I may, in conclusion, we say it's appropriate for the question of sill release to be considered at this time as part of the local plan process, and I appreciate that's exactly what's happening. And we say it's appropriate for the site to be released from the sill. It's got excellent prospects of contributing meaningfully to housing and jobs capacity in the context of steeply stepped up housing targets for London boroughs in the new London plan. The master plan we've provided shows that a delightful and sensitive scheme can be achieved. And we say the site should be allowed to fulfil its potential to serve as a transition zone between industrial and residential spaces, being as it is ideally placed right on the very edge of the current sill and enjoying the benefits that we've explained. And importantly, there's more than sufficient available waste throughput capacity in the West London waste area to compensate for the loss of the site, as explained by our expert, Mr. Zimmerman. So those are the key points I wanted to make, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good. Now I think it's time to give the OPDC a chance to respond. Richard Moules, are you going to orchestrate this for me, please?
That's right. I'll ask Lauren to pop her camera on and to respond.
Thank you. So I want to sort of focus, so in summary, our response is that the site doesn't meet criteria and shouldn't be released from SIL, and focus in on the core principal reason for that, in relation to the need for sites to remain in SIL. We had a discussion this morning in relation to the high demand for industrial space, and there was reference to documents during that previous session. Some as part of the examination library was put forward by the Grand Union Alliance in terms of the Centre for London report, and the references in there to that, the challenges in terms of the lack of supply of industrial land and the values that are being achieved as a result of that lack of supply. We cited strategic evidence at the London plan level in terms of the net demand for industrial at the London plan level, and our own evidence in terms of those future growth sectors that are likely to grow and be attracted to our area, and the fact that includes a range of industrial uses. So there was an extended discussion this morning about the high demand for industrial space and how we can proactively protect SIL, intensify SIL, to ensure that we're providing and meeting that demand. With regards to the discussion in relation to the site having a B2 use, that's still a SIL compliant use. So that is still a use that can be located in SIL. I mean, we've gone through a process through our industrial land review addendum in response to interim findings to plug a housing capacity gap arising from those interim findings. And so we've gone for a sort of a rigorous assessment to identify sites for release, and we've done that in order, and that's demonstrated is that we have eliminated our housing capacity gap. We are in general conformity, and that's confirmed for a statement of common ground with the GLA in relation to the housing targets and to job capacity as well, and therefore, and what's also shown in the industrial land review addendum report is that all existing sites are needed to, that are remaining in SIL, need to sort of contribute towards meeting that high demand for industrial and need to be safeguarded. And you'll see in the to ensure general conformity in terms of helping meet industrial needs. The last section of the industrial land review addendum looks at in close detail the opportunities for us to try and achieve a net gain, and that will be coming from a contribution of sites across SIL, and the fact that we need those sites to be protected and to be intensified to meet that need, and to make sure we're in general conformity in terms of doing that. So that's our principal point. The principal point relates to the need to retain SIL and the considerations related to that. I think the remaining, I'll just have a look at the remaining points. So the points made in terms of the sites in the DCS. So the DCS was developed in line with PPG guidance and provides that information for judgment to be made in terms of sites being included in the plan, and we've set out mitigation measures against sites where they're identified as not being available. So the mitigation measures are in there, and we've set them out in that document. And with regards to that, those sites have been in our plan since submission, and they're unchanged by those modifications. Just to add as a supplementary point, obviously, OPDC was set up as a mayoral development corporation, and with a remit and a role and function in helping to facilitate complex regeneration projects. So we're very much confident in our ability to be able to work with landowners and engage with them on those issues identified in the DCS. Development capacity study, sorry, just to use its full name. In terms of potential impact on SIL, the site is contiguous with the SIL boundary. You were shown sort of the relationship in terms of adjoining sites, and you can see its relationship in terms of those, and therefore the potential impact that could have if there were sensitive uses introduced on the site. In terms of reference to sorry, make sure I'm covering all the points. Introducing non-SIL compliant uses isn't an appropriate sort of way to manage edge of SIL sites. There are other areas of SIL. I mean, our whole SIL boundary is an edge, so it has sort of the potential for wider impacts. There are other ways to retain SIL uses and manage any relationships if they're near to residential uses, and we do have examples of where industrial developments, including industrial intensification, has happened and come through the planning process and near to housing uses, and those have been granted or resolution to grant permission on those sites. With regard to the points around accessibility, that is part of the criteria, obviously, that we looked at as part of the industrial land review addendum. We focused the release of sites on those areas that have the greatest access to sustainable travel modes. It's a way we identify priority sites to assess and ensure other sites have better access than 100 Twyford Abbey Road. I believe the PTAL on the Twyford Abbey Road site is a PTAL of 1B, so that it has a very low accessibility score against that. And with regard to the availability point, just to add that availability was one of the detailed criteria considered after we'd looked at things like the prioritising access to sustainable travel modes, and it is one of a range of things looked at as part of the second step that we took as in a sequential approach to assessing sites. And so it's not it doesn't determine the outcome in and of itself. And when you look at all of the criteria and the process that we've gone through as part of the industrial land addendum, 100 Twyford Abbey Road does not would not perform well, considering the full process that we've gone through. There was reference to, albeit in relation to the site coming forward or being proposed for mixed use residential, the fact that the site has no limitations that would prevent it being developed. It had no problems with access, contamination, I think, etc. And we see that as an advantage in terms of its ability to come forward for industrial development, as that is the case. So there's no reason why, given that it doesn't have the burden of any limitations, that it couldn't come forward for industrial and still compliant use, industrial development and still compliant uses. Sorry, just a point to note, going back to the 7 sites in the sorry. Oh, for the modifications, we have on all of the modified sites, we've agreed statements of common ground with landowners. So there's that agreement in place with the changes that we have made to sites. That agreement has been agreed through statements of common ground with the landowners in those cases. I think the remaining points were in relation to the supplementary point that we made with regards to the waste use on the site. So I can quickly, like I say, that the principal point is around sill and the impact on sill, but I can quickly cover the waste issues that has arisen as part of that discussion. So there is a requirement for all waste streams to be looked at, and indeed the West London Waste Plan does go through looking at all waste streams and whether there is what the requirement is against each. So although it's not an apportioned waste stream in the London Plan, construction, demolition, waste is a waste stream that planning authorities plan for. So the West London Waste Plan does set that out. There's a chapter where they go through the individual waste streams that it needs to look at, and it gives a conclusion as to what the picture is for each of those. And with regards to the reference to the West London Waste Authority, they're not the planning authority, they are the disposal authority, so they aren't required to plan for waste beyond the apportionment waste, because that's just not their statutory remit. That's the only reason why. But the planning authority does need to plan for waste beyond apportionment. And the West London Waste Plan plans for waste through a combination of safeguarding existing sites, because it minimises the need for you to find any more. It optimises existing sites, and there's a new site that it identifies and allocates as well. So it does a combination of things. So you'll see in policy WLWP2 that's why there's safeguarding of existing sites as well as allocated sites, because they all make a contribution to meeting need, and and therefore there's no that it means you don't have to keep constantly finding new sites. And I think those are all of the matters that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Walls, is there anyone else on the OPD side that you wanted to contribute at this stage?
Thank you, sir. I don't think so. I think Peter, Tom, and Emma, if they've got anything to add, will pop their hands up. Have you got any questions, sir, for OPDC out of those matters?
Yeah, I do. Lauren Lavigne, you were quite clear, I think, in your presentation there that waste is a supplementary point. Your main point, your principal point, is the sill. Have I understood that correctly? Yeah, yes, you're nodding. Good. Okay. So my understanding of the presentation that Kate Ollie made was that was largely based on an analysis of waste requirements. And I'll give you an opportunity in a moment, Kate Ollie, to come back to me if I've misunderstood that. But what I wanted to ask the OPDC was this. Even if Kate Ollie's people win the waste argument, where does that take us? Presumably, you would say, okay, we don't need this to continue as a waste site because we are convinced by the work that they've done to show that it can be handled elsewhere, but it's still a sill, and there is a demand for non-waste sill sites. And that's your principal argument, it seems to me. Is that a fair understanding of where you're at?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Then that's where I need to turn to Kate Ollie and say, I think you need to go further if you're going to convince me to allow this to be taken out of SIL.
Thank you, sir. Well, it's interesting that the OPDC did focus its response to our submissions in relation to waste. For example, again at page 623, that the point that I quoted, it says all of the sites have a role to play and cumulatively help ensure West London can address its waste needs, irrespective of whether the site can increase capacity. Existing capacity that can be achieved on site can contribute towards meeting waste needs. So the credibility of focusing just on general industrial needs to be seen in the context of what OPDC actually said in their response to our representations, and that's the notice that we have had of the case in response to us. But I do note in relation to the pleading before you that there's a high demand for industrial space. Yes, I mean there is, but we'll note that the Secretary of State direction to the Mayor in relation to the new London plan, that the no net loss of industrial land requirement has gone from the London plan, with housing targets going up by some 23% instead. So it has to be seen in that context, and the policies being relied on and being looked at in this section of the local plan process relate to the safeguarding of waste sites. So we'll be forgiven for focusing on that, and we've shown fairly incontrovertibly in my submission that we're simply not needed for that, despite the fact that the local planning authority said it does need to plan for waste beyond apportionment. But I'd just like to ask Mr. Zimmern if he's got any comments on that. It was said that the local planning authority need to plan for waste beyond apportionment, just so we can be clear on that. If Mr. Zimmern could perhaps come back and deal with that first point.
Thank you. Yes, in the broadest context, the local waste planning authorities have to look at a range of waste from household to commercial, industrial, and construction, demolition, excavation waste. The ultimate point really in this sort of discussion is, if we look at the overcapacity that is there is a strong point within both the GLA guidance in terms of policy and safeguarding of waste sites to say there is sufficient capacity to take this relatively small throughput up by a range of other sites. And that's just looking at the West London waste area and a little bit of the North London waste area. If we would throw the net wider and look at the whole of the Greater London area, then the picture is even stronger in terms of existing waste capacity. So this site is really not strategic, not central to being able to provide sufficient capacity for treating construction demolition waste in Greater London or the West London Waste Authority area.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes. That's probably as far as we can take it now, unless there's anything further, Kate, Ollie, that your people want to add about what the OPDC regards as the principal point, which is the capacity for what they call industrial, but they mean to include commercial stuff as well within that definition. They call it SIL compliant development. It's a phrase which covers a multitude of sins.
Yes.
Not just
industrial, I suppose.
Yes. Not just industrial. It covers other things as well.
Yes.
Is there anything more which you can bring to the table on that issue?
Just a couple of points, because it was said quite strongly that all existing sites remaining in the SIL need to contribute to meet industrial needs. Now, that's a very broad statement, but clearly the local authority has, to use the words, chopped sites out of the SIL to meet acute housing requirements, as it's had to do as a result of the collapse of the car giant allocation. So the points we made in our representations about the contribution that can be made to housing, for which it's absolutely trite, there is an acute need, and we've pointed out the superiority of this site in terms of its availability. I think Ms. Lavinia was confirming that the sites in the DCS were unchanged, so presumably so too are the caveats. The point's made that the site's contiguous with the SIL boundary, so you can see the relationship and impact if sensitive uses were introduced, but that doesn't respond to what we've said about the suitability of the site as a transition zone, and the point that it's only warehousing and storage to the south, so there's not going to be that clash. And this particular small edge of the SIL happens to front onto a large established residential community. It's a natural transition zone. So if we're balancing all of the competing needs and bearing in mind the absolutely acute need for housing, that's why we say now submission. This site is a gift. It's a gift to OPDC and should have been seen as such. It's a natural transition zone site. It's the use that we've demonstrated in the master plan, and that's just one use, is of course for both residential and industrial, not just residential. So the unique points of the site tip the balance in favour of what we're saying and what we're offering in my submission. I think that's probably all I need to speak about. I would ask you, sir, to obviously go back through what OPDC have actually said in the consultation response, and there was a very clear emphasis on waste, hence we've directed ourselves to that.
Yeah.
I mean, so you'll be best placed to obviously to appreciate if I could use the word debacle in relation to the car giant allocation. We have offering 315 units to make up what's still likely going to be a shortfall when you take into account that some of the sites that the OPDC appear to be relying on just aren't going to be available. So there might not be such a large gap now, but there's potentially a gap of a few hundred or 1,500 units. This could go a substantial way towards plugging that gap and also offering benefits and being a very nice transition zone site.
Yes, you're quite right to connect. These things are all connected. One of the reasons that I directed the car giant site to be taken out of the plan was because the change in land values since the plan was prepared made that a non-runner. But that same because the car giant site, they couldn't afford to relocate it. But those same land values changes they put the OPDC in a bind because they reflect the increasing demand for industrial land, and that's why they are so concerned also to be very careful about what they release from SIL. So yes, the things are related, and you're quite right to relate them in that way. But I think you can probably deduce from the fact that if you're right and the OPDC has shifted their ground from an emphasis on waste matters to now an emphasis on the industrial land point, you can deduce from that, or you can infer from that, that you may well have won the you may well have won the waste argument, but the industrial land argument is still there. Okay, thank you for that presentation. Anyway, that has been quite useful for me in clarifying my understanding of the representation made. That's good. I see, Lauren Lavinia, you've still got your hand up to make a contribution. I've also got one point to put to you. Is it a correct understanding of the policies on intensification and redevelopment within SIL that they exclude mixed uses, including housing uses? Is that right, or do they allow for a mixed use, including housing uses within SIL?
So the intensification is industrial intensification in SIL. So it's for SIL. It's to support industrial uses within SIL.
Okay. All right. Okay. And tell me the point you want to make anyway.
It's to sort of going back to our responses to the representation. We do refer to the fact that sites not identified for release from SIL are needed to contribute towards industrial needs. That's very much part of our response, as well as responding on the point in terms of the development capacity study. And I think we repeat that in a number of our response rows, if you like. So that is it. I just wanted to clarify that is part and was part of our response. And just to sort of as a reminder to some of the points, we are meeting our housing, our London plan and total development plan target. We are in general conformity with the London plan on housing and jobs, and we've got the signed statement from the GLA with regards to those matters. So there's not a requirement for this site to plug any shortfall in housing capacity. We've already done that and demonstrating that through the industrial land review addendum. And just to follow on from your comments in terms of SIL, I mean, you would have heard this morning, but it's an important point to make again. The SIL that's within the OPDC area is London's largest SIL. It has an importance and significance not only locally, but also sub-regionally and for London. And it's very important to the functioning of London and servicing London's growing population and its growth as well, which is going to be increasingly important, obviously, as we recover from the pandemic. So it has a very important function, and you're right, that's why we are very concerned, given the dynamics in our area with regards to releasing some SIL land, designating some SIL land to accommodate housing, but that is on the that we then have a need to balance the demand from industrial as well. So to strike the balance between both of those priorities, and we're very much doing that through safeguarding the sill that's being retained within the sill boundary, promoting and encouraging intensification so that we can increase the amount of floor space there in order to meet demand, and being quite proactive in terms of setting the site allocations to support that, encouraging that through policy as well. And just a final point, and it's in relation to the points that's been made about 100 Twyford Abbey Road being on the edge of sill next to residential, and that relationship being unique. And I just we want to make the point that isn't unique in the context of the OPDC area. I'll point you to an example. There's the Wesley estate that sits pretty much near the heart of Park Royal, that's surrounded by sill. So in terms of those wider implications of impact, if we just look at sites in simplistic terms, it has impacts in terms of eroding sites that have a similar situation with regard and proximity with regard to residential. And I think those are the points that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay. Kate Ollie, last point from you.
Thank you, sir. There is an important point actually arising out of your question, sir, and the response to it, as to whether the council should be welcoming mixed uses on sill sites. Because if the council actually wants to see intensification of industrial use, then it really needs to be real about the fact that there may need to then be an enabling component, and the residential component would be the enabling part. So as I can't do more than stress that what we'll be looking to do would be a mixed residential and industrial scheme, and not simply residential. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, sorry, Lauren Lavinier, is that hand up a legacy hand, or is there another point you want to make?
No, just a point, a numbers point, in terms of industrial intensification, and the point I made that the focus in sill is industrial intensification. We made reference to in the previous hearing session today with regards to what progress is being made towards industrial intensification and we pointed to studies which demonstrate that intensification there's suitable sites for it and it's viable within our area. In terms of the progress that we've seen through the monitoring of applications and what's in the pipeline, it's showing that we're sort of hitting the 150,000 square metre mark. So the industrial intensification, according to our evidence base and that data, shows that proposition for industrial uses within sill is viable and is coming forward.
Yeah, I remembered the session earlier this morning. Okay, thank you very much for that. As I say, I think enough information from today to this afternoon to come to a conclusion on this. But thank you to everyone who's taken part. And thank you. And as this is the last of the hearing sessions, can I thank the OPDC for hosting them on Teams, which is a help to the inspectorate in this time. Also can we thank Hannah, who's substituting for the programme officer today, for making sure that everything's run very smoothly. I'm going to leave you now and go away and write a report. And I can't at this stage give an estimate of when my report is going to be ready, but I'm hoping that it won't be long delayed. But today's hearing sessions have given me something to think about before I write my report. So thank you very much to everyone who's taken part. I will leave you now. Goodbye.
Good afternoon. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye.